Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a slow walk through a place where time stretches thin, where every sound echoes a little too long, and the scent of cooking is conspicuously absent. Welcome to a village on the edge of famine. There's no official name, no map that marks it as significant, just rows of homes sagging inward, fields too quiet, and eyes that don't quite meet yours. This isn't war. This isn't plague. This is hunger, the kind that creeps in quietly until everything, even you, begins to hollow out. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just after sunrise. Not that it matters much. In a famine, time stops being measured in hours and starts being measured in spoons. There's no welcome party, no cheerful farmer waving you over. Just silence, interrupted by the shuffle of bare feet and the occasional clink of a wooden ladle against an empty pot. The houses here lean like tired bodies. Some are missing doors. Others have smoke stains along the ceiling from fires that haven't burned in weeks. At first glance, it might seem like people are managing. You see someone hauling water, children kicking a stone, an old woman sweeping her doorstep with a branch. But then you realize the bucket is empty. The children are too thin to shout, and the old woman is sweeping imaginary dust because habits are harder to break than hope. Mainstream fact: between the 18th and early 20th centuries, Europe and Asia saw repeated waves of famine, many caused not by natural disasters but by poor governance, forced exports, and war. In Ireland, British grain exports continued during the potato famine. In Bengal, rice was hoarded and diverted. In China, entire valleys were stripped of food to support distant armies. Famine isn't just bad weather, it's often bad planning. You wander toward the village granary, expecting the usual: sealed bins, locks, maybe even armed guards if things are desperate. What you find instead is a structure that used to be important. Now, it's just another shelter. The locks are rusted away. The inside smells like dry mud. There are no rats, because even the rats have learned there's nothing left here. A boy sits in the corner, chewing what looks like bark. He doesn't look at you, just keeps gnawing, slow and steady, like it's a job. You're starting to understand the silence. Hunger slows everything. It turns noise into risk. Laughing means burning calories. Talking means explaining why you haven't fed your youngest in 2 days. Everyone here is conserving something: energy, shame, even memory. Quirky tidbit: in some 19th century famines, communities developed shame recipes, dishes so embarrassing that no one would admit to eating them. In parts of France, that meant boiling leather. In parts of Russia, it meant plaster scraped from walls. And in northern Japan, tree bark powder, pancakes, slightly bitter, slightly poisonous, and entirely eaten anyway. You approach a small shrine near the village edge. It's barely more than a rock with offering-stony bundles of cloth, a dead bird, half a button. Someone scratched a few characters into the wood. Please not today. You don't need to read the rest. You know what they're asking. Historians still argue whether famines are natural disasters or political crimes. Some say nature is to blame: droughts, floods, blights. Others say that true famine only happens when people in power decide certain lives are worth less than surplus exports, military campaigns, or pride. The villagers here don't care about the argument. All they know is that something broke, and now they're breaking too. You follow the path past the shrine to a dry paddy field. Once, rice grew here in waving green sheets. Now, It's a grid of cracked dirt. A child has drawn a circle in the center and filled it with rocks shaped like a pot. She's cooking. You sit on a stone and watch her pretend to stir. She offers you a bite of nothing. You accept. It's the politest thing you've done all day. Later, you pass a man carrying a sack over his shoulder. You ask what's in it. He says, rain. You think he's joking. He isn't. He's been collecting water from roof drips, hoping to trade it for millet. The sack is nearly empty. So is his face. You think about offering food if you had any, but even that's complicated, because in a famine, a gift can be dangerous. It singles someone out. It invites envy, theft, even violence. Helping one person means not helping another. It's math that no one wants to do. So you keep walking. You nod. You smile. You learn how to be present without promise. And then you come to the house that smells like food. At first, your stomach doesn't believe it, but the scent is real faint, like memory, but real. You follow it to a home where a woman is boiling something. She guards the pot like a dragon. You don't ask what's inside. You already know it won't be anything you'd recognize. Roots, probably. Bark. Maybe boiled cloth soaked in broth for illusion. She offers you a sip. You accept. It tastes like warmth, not flavor, just the memory of heat and fullness. You ask her how she's surviving. She shrugs. Same as everyone, she says, waiting for the rice that won't come. Then she adds, but we tell stories. That helps. And that's when it clicks. This village doesn't survive on food. It survives on fiction, on rumors of shipments that never arrive, on legends of neighbors who found buried yams, on dreams of harvests drawn into the dirt with sticks. In this place, hope is a kind of hunger, too. You wake to the sound of nothing, not silence exactly, more like absence. No roosters crowing, no dogs barking, no pots clanging. Just the breeze slipping through the cracks of your shelter and the soft scrape of someone outside gathering weeds, or maybe just pretending to. You've slept in a barn, or something that used to be one. Straw pokes through your sleeves, and your back aches like you wrestled a ghost all night. You roll over slowly, not out of laziness, but because movement costs something calories, strength, breath, and in a famine, you budget everything. You step out into the village again, but this morning, something's different. Not brighter, not busier, just more alert. There's a tension in the air, like everyone is waiting for something. A cart, a soldier, a death. You spot the old man from yesterday's sack of rain guy standing at the edge of the road, still holding that same empty bundle like it's going to sprout legs and walk him to safety. He's watching the tree line. You ask what he's looking for. Crows, he says. It's not a riddle. Crows mean corpses, and corpses mean food, sometimes. Mainstream fact. In multiple recorded famines, including the Irish potato famine and the Bengal famine, the first visible warning signs weren't statistics, they were animals. Birds circling, dogs scavenging where they hadn't before, fish disappearing from rivers. When wildlife changes its habits, people follow, sometimes too late. You walk farther today, past the boundary stone that no longer marks a true border. Fields stretch out, ragged and unused. Here and there, someone's trying to grow something, not riceites too demanding. But you spot turnip tops, struggling cabbage, and what might have been potatoes before the rot claimed them. The earth doesn't smell fertile, it smells tired. You find a group of villagers huddled around a single mound. They're whispering, arguing, gesturing down at the dirt. At first you think it's a grave, but then you see the crude tools. They're digging. You ask if they've found food. One woman looks up, teeth gritted. "Bones," she says. "Old ones. From the last famine." Someone laughs a dry, breathless sound and mutters, "Maybe they left something behind." It's a joke, but it isn't. Quirky tidbit. In parts of 17th century Europe, entire churches held secret bone lotteries. Parishioners would mark old plague graves on crude maps, then take turns digging, hoping, absurdly, that someone had been buried with bread or salted pork. They never found any, but they still looked. You head toward the next hamlet, guided by nothing more than rumor. Along the way, you meet a boy with a fishing pole made of twine and a stick. There's no river nearby. He's casting into dry ground, miming the movements of a fisherman like muscle memory will somehow produce fish. He smiles at you and offers to trade his catch for a handful of rice. You give him a stone instead. He nods solemnly, then casts again. Historians still argue whether hallucinations during famine are purely biological, caused by starvation and malnutrition, or psychological, a coping mechanism. In some famines, people reported tasting food that wasn't there. Others swore they could smell their mother's stew from inside collapsed barns. Whether it's science or sorrow, the result is the same. Sometimes your mind feeds you when your body can't. You finally reach a village with smoke rising from the center. It's not a fire, it's an oven barely. Someone is baking. You get closer and see the baker, a woman with red eyes, ash on her cheeks, kneeling beside what looks like a communal pit. She's mixing something into patties brown, wet, slightly grainy. You ask what it is. "Earth bread," she says. You blink. She nods. "Mud and bran. With cabbage water, if we're lucky. It fills the stomach, even if it doesn't stay there long." She hands you one. It's warm. It smells like nothing. You take a bite. It crumbles like sawdust, tastes like memories and guilt. But your stomach calms, if only briefly. You thank her. She nods. We take turns. Baking, watching, worrying. No one eats alone. There's a dignity in that. Starving, but together. You sit with them as they eat. No one speaks of hunger directly. Instead, they talk about the past feasts that happened once, recipes passed down like folklore. They speak of carrots the size of arms, of rice that steamed into clouds. Whether it's all true doesn't matter. What matters is the remembering. Then, quietly, one woman says, "There's meat in the hills." Everyone goes silent. You don't ask. You already know what she means. Not deer, not wild pigs, something else. In every famine, the same rumors spread. Desperate solutions, dark ones. Cannibalism is the last taboo, and the first to be whispered. Someone always knows someone who saw someone who didn't come back. And maybe it's not true. Maybe it is. The woman doesn't elaborate. She just adds, "That's why we stay together. No one goes alone." You nod. You understand. Later, as the sun dips low, you help carry water from a distant well. You take turns lifting the bucket because your arms are trembling more than you want to admit. The well is deep. The water is clean. It tastes like salvation. And that's when you realize no one here expects rescue. There are no government wagons, no Red Cross, no saviors on horseback, just each other and the rules they've made to survive. Never eat alone, never hoard, never wander after dusk. And if someone offers stew, ask what's in it. The wind howls louder tonight, though it carries no storm, just dust, dry, insistent, everywhere. It collects in the folds of your sleeves, the corners of your eyes, the back of your throat. You wake to it, half choking on nothing, your lips cracked and peeling. Thirst bites harder than hunger now. You reach for your canteen empty. Everyone's is. The well, reliable yesterday, has turned cloudy. Maybe it was the digging. Maybe something shifted underground. Or maybe the well is just tired too. You join a line of villagers waiting for a cart. Not a food cart, a corpse cart. They come every few days now. 2 boys dragging a plank cart, its wheels barely holding. They wear cloth over their faces, not out of fear of disease, but out of respect. One of them nods at you. "We've got space," he says flatly. "For now." You help them. It's not asked, but it's needed. The dead aren't buried deep anymore, just covered with enough dirt to keep the smell away for a while. You place the old man from the road gently onto the plank. His sack is still in his hand. You leave it there. Mainstream fact. During the Great Famine of 1317 in Europe, burial rituals all but collapsed. In many towns, carts were sent out daily to collect the dead. Priests stopped performing individual rites. The dead were stacked, layered, hurried. There simply wasn't time or strength for mourning. As you work, you overhear the boys talking about the exchange. You ask? One of them shrugs. "They're trading names now," he says. "If you've got a healthy name, you can swap it for food." You blink. "A name?" The other boy explains. "In the capital, relief rations are being distributed to households on official rolls. If someone dies, but you have their name, you can stand in their place. It's barter by bureaucracy, identity theft, famine edition." Quirky tidbit. In Edo period Japan, there were rumors of villages that created paper ghosts, names of dead relatives submitted for rice stipends, kept alive on temple rolls for generations. Some monks went along with it, others didn't. You sit down beside a crumbling wall. Nearby, a woman is boiling shoes. Yes, shoes. She explains softly, almost apologetically. The leather has protein. If you scrape it, soak it long enough, add herbs. "What herbs?" you interrupt. She laughs. "Anything green. Doesn't matter. It's the chewing that helps." She offers you a strip. It tastes like old belt and hope, but it sits heavy in your stomach, which is all that matters. Historians still argue whether leather soup became widespread or remained mostly legend. Some diaries describe it vividly, others omit it entirely, perhaps out of shame. But the story persists. Across regions and languages, if it could boil, it could be dinner. That night, the village holds a quiet meeting. No shouting, no chairs, just a gathering under the half-burnt torii gate at the edge of the shrine. Someone's drawn a list in the dirt, not names. Jobs: digging, carrying, guard duty, cooking, loosely defined, watch posts. One man suggests a new post: storytelling. He's laughed at, gently. But the next morning, someone's built a stage of crates. Just in case. The stories begin slowly. At first, they're historical tales of emperors and gods. Then they shift. One old woman tells the tale of the last sweet peach she ever ate. A child describes a city he's never seen but dreams about every night. You tell a story, too, about rain. You don't even remember where it came from, but it feels true. Because here's the thing. Famine steals food, but also language. And if you don't feed that, too, it starves. You spend the next day helping repair the bathhouse, not for bathing, for boiling roots. It's the biggest vessel in town, and someone discovered a patch of wild tubers near the hills. They're bitter, they burn your throat, but they grow like weeds. You pull weeds, dandelions, sorrel, anything with color. You learn what plants to avoid. The red ones are mostly deadly. The white ones lie to you. The green ones are usually just disgusting. At night, the stories change. Someone jokes, Once upon a time, I had a full stomach. Everyone groans, but the joke returns the next night with a twist. Soon, it becomes tradition. It's strange, but true. Laughter makes the hunger quieter. Not gone, just hushed. That evening, you catch a pair of eyes watching the group from the woods. Too large for a fox, too small for a bear, gone before you can move. You mention it quietly. No one reacts. But the next day, more people take watch shifts. A farmer tightens the ropes on his tools. A child hides the last of the tubers in a hole under the shrine. People are preparing not for attack, but for loss. Because in famine, theft is predictable. And worse, forgivable. That night, someone is missing. A boy who used to mimic bird sounds. No one says anything aloud, but his mother digs a new hole by the shrine and doesn't fill it in. Mainstream fact. In many historical famines, especially the 20th century ones, children vanished at alarming rates. Some were taken, others fled, a few returned, most didn't. The village carries on. The next morning, a cart arrives, not for the dead, for grain. It's not a miracle, it's a bribe. A local official, likely skimming off records, is redistributing surplus at a price. Not money, not goods. Labor. He needs workers to help harvest in the city, where the famine hasn't bitten as deep. He wants volunteers. No one volunteers. So he picks. You are one of them. You leave at dawn, your stomach filled with borrowed broth, your mind heavy with uneaten names and stories told in hunger. You don't know what waits in the city, but you do know this. You've survived another day. And here, that's a victory. The road to the city is not paved, not with stones, not with intentions, just ruts in the soil, worn deeper with each desperate footstep. You travel with 6 others, 3 from your village, 3 from a nearby one whose name you forgot almost as soon as it was spoken. No one talks much. Conversation is too expensive. Words cost moisture, and you need every drop. The official who chose you thin as a rake, but sharp as a sickle rides ahead on a mule. He doesn't look back often. When he does, it's only to make sure no one's run. He carries no weapon. He doesn't need to. Hunger does his policing for him. By midday, you pass a caravan of monks, or beggars, or both, it's hard to tell. They sing softly, a chant with no beginning or end, just vowels stretched thin by dust and miles. One hands you a folded scrap of rice paper. You unfold it later, in secret. It says, "The body forgets, the stomach remembers, feed neither with lies." You don't know what it means, but you keep it anyway. Mainstream fact. During the 19th century Irish potato famine, mass migrations weren't just overseas. Local populations were relocated to cities under promise of food or work. These internal displacements often led to overcrowded slums, spread of disease, and deepened poverty, ironically, worsening the very famine they aimed to relieve. After 2 days of walking, you see the city, not as a skyline but as smoke, fires, chimneys, cooking pits, evidence of life, or at least activity. The air here smells different. Less of rot, more of oil and charcoal. You expected noise, but there's a silence to the outskirts, as if the city, too, is holding its breath. You're sent to a grain depot. Technically, it's a warehouse. In practice, it's a fortress of sacks and suspicion. The man in charge is a bureaucrat with soft hands and a hard stare. You work, he says. You eat. You ask questions. He shrugs. Ask the rats. You don't ask. Your job is simple. Move sacks from one side of the depot to the other. Count them. Recount them. Stack. Unstack. Never mind that the sacks never change. That this is clearly busy work. It keeps you moving. and movement keeps you distracted. Quirky tidbit. In early 20th century Russian famine relief stations, workers were sometimes given meaningless tasks like sorting already, sorted grain simply to maintain order and morale. Activity, one inspector wrote, is the last refuge before despair. At night, you sleep on burlap, your breath fogs in the cold. Someone snores nearby, a wet, ragged sound that doesn't stop. You think it might be a death rattle, but by morning, they're still alive. Just barely. The food is not what you imagined. A thin porridge, more water than grain. A dried plum, once a week, if you're lucky. You count the plums like others count blessings, or teeth. One morning, a new shipment arrives. Not grain people, dozens of them, packed tight into a cart like kindling. They're younger, paler, cleaner. They call themselves volunteers, but the way they clutch each other tells another story. They're students, or were, from a closed academy up north. Too many mouths to feed, so the teachers relocated them. The official grins as he announces it. Fresh labor. You'll work faster now. No one cheers. Among the students is a girl with ink-stained fingers. She carries a book she never opens, just clutches it to her chest like a shield. You sit near her during meals. One night, she speaks, "I used to write poems." She doesn't elaborate. You don't ask for one. Some things are too fragile to summon on command. Historians still argue whether famine erodes culture or preserves it. Some say disaster kills art. Others insist that suffering distills it. A few believe famine births new traditions, oral stories, songs, rituals born from the need to make meaning out of misery. The girl tells you that hunger makes her dream more. "I see rivers," she says. "Sometimes I drink from them. Sometimes they carry me." You nod. You've had that dream too. But in yours, the river is dry. Work continues. Grain sacks come and go. You don't question it anymore. One day, the girl doesn't show up. Her book remains, pressed under a brick. You flip it open, blank pages. All of them. The ink? Just on her hands, not her words. You understand. Sometimes, pretending is all that's left. Then, without warning, you're dismissed. Your quota's met, the clerk says. You may return. No thanks, no payment, just release. Freedom in a famine feels like being let go by a ghost. The road home is lonelier. Some of your group has disappeared, either reassigned, run off, or buried. The official is gone, replaced by a younger one who reads from a scroll and doesn't make eye contact. You travel light. No book, no grain, just experience. That heavy, bitter kind that weighs down your shoulders more than any sack ever did. Back in your village, the bathhouse is gone. Burnt, maybe on purpose. The shrine's torii gate has been rebuilt, but smaller. The well is sealed with stones. The corpse cart still rolls, but slower now. And the storyteller's stage? Still there, still used. That night, someone tells a story about a student with no poems, only ink-stained hands. You smile. You know how it ends. Or rather, you know it never really ends. Because famine is not just about food. It's about what survives when nothing else does. And somehow, against logic, against history, you did. You return to your home, or what's left of it. The gate creaks in a way that's almost welcoming if a groan can be affectionate. The roof has caved on one side. The vegetable plot is dry, but weeds are valiantly holding the perimeter like stubborn soldiers. You don't know whether to cry or salute them. Inside, your mother's pot still hangs above the ashes of what used to be a hearth. You run your hand along its blackened rim. It's cold now, but it remembers fire. Everything here does. You sit. You listen. You wait for something to change. It doesn't. That night, your neighbors come calling not to celebrate your return, but to ask questions, not about what you saw, but what you brought. Grain, salt, money, news, hope. You shake your head. I brought back a story, you say. It feels thin as a blanket woven from spider webs, but they listen anyway. Mainstream fact, across many famine-racked societies, returning laborers and conscripts were treated with both awe and suspicion. Survivors were often tasked with carrying home information blamed for bringing bad luck. Their first-hand accounts formed the backbone of oral histories in regions too poor for written archives. Over the next weeks, the rhythm of life limps forward. The river's edge sprouts of faint green fuzzreeds, grass, something alive. You and the children begin rebuilding the bathhouse, not for cleansing, for warmth, for togetherness. You heat stones, boil rainwater. It isn't much, but it makes people laugh. Laughter, in a famine, is the rarest spice. One day, a stranger appears, a traveling monk with one eye, 2 bells on his staff, and a mouth that only opens when necessary. He sits under the plum tree and eats nothing, just drinks tea. From a cup he carries tucked in his robe like a sacred relic. Eventually, you ask him why he's here. Listening, he replies. To what? To what's left. He's quiet a long time before adding, that's always where healing begins. Quirky tidbit, during periods of famine in Edo, period Japan, some monks would travel from village to village, acting as listening posts. They offered no food, no advice-only presence. Locals sometimes called them stone witnesses, believing that even silent companionship could be spiritually nourishing. You watch him for days. He never preaches, never judges, just listens. Eventually, people begin to sit with him. First, the elderly, then children, then you. You speak of the depot, of the ink-handed girl, of the book with blank pages. He nods. There are no blank pages, he says, only unread ones. Historians still argue whether post-famine recovery is faster in communities with shared rituals versus those with rigid hierarchies. Some claim mutual aid and shared grieving accelerate emotional healing. Others argue that without structure, people dissolve into isolated survivalist units. Your village chooses ritual. Someone finds the storyteller's drum. Another recuts the rice paper screen with silhouettes of old tales. Rabbits in the moon, wolves in the fields, ghosts who bring rice. Children act them out. Laughter returns. Thin, yes, but real. Then, one morning, a cart arrives. Drawn by a goat too skinny to bleat, it carries a woman in orange robes and a basket of yams. She's from another village less lucky, she says. She offers to trade seeds for stories. You hesitate. Then offer her the tale of the student who dreamed of rivers and pages. She nods, places 5 seeds in your palm. These are enough, she says, if you water them with something true. You do. The first yam sprouts in a pot made from an old ladle. The leaves are stubborn, dark green, utterly unfazed by the world's grief. One night, as you sit by the shrine, a boy asks, when will it end? You think, you search the stars, as if they hold answers. Then you reply, maybe it already has. Maybe we just don't recognize peace when it looks like planting a yam. He blinks, then nods, and eats the last roasted acorn without complaint. You wake to the sound of dripping soft, patient, and persistent. It's not rain, not this time. It's the thaw of last night's frost from the rafters above, trickling through a crack in the roof, and tapping steadily into a clay bowl you left by accident. You forgot it was there. Now it's half full, and that feels like a small miracle. Outside, the sky is a grey wool blanket pulled tight over the world. The road that once led wagons to the market is now a bog of churned-up earth, where no cart dares go and no hooves dare tread. But even still, life moves forward, pulled not by momentum but by desperation. You rub your arms, trying to stir some warmth into your limbs. Then you stand and begin the day's ritual of pretending you have somewhere to go, someone to find, or something to eat. You pass the church first, its bell long silent. A notice was nailed to the doors months ago, something about grain requisitions, something about righteous redistribution. But the paper has curled with damp and frostbite, and no one has read it in weeks. The priest hasn't been seen since the frost set in. Some say he was taken, others say he fled. You suspect he simply faded. Like so many others, his prayers lost in a season where no God seems to listen. Down the lane, the baker's house stands like a tomb. Once, its chimney was the landmark, always smoking, always fragrant. But now, its stones are moss-darkened, and the oven cold. You remember her face, flour-caked and stern. Her loaves had personality, thick, heeled like soldiers' boots, or curved like smiles. Then one day, she simply locked the door and never unlocked it again. Some say she still lives inside, slicing smaller and smaller pieces for fewer and fewer guests. A child runs past you barefoot, which would have shocked you last spring. But shoes now are tokens of status. Some children don't even remember owning them. The child's legs are blue with cold, his cheeks swollen, but he moves with a speed that belongs to hunger, not joy. He is chasing something, or running from it. It's hard to tell. You follow out of curiosity, not out of concern. That feeling dulled long ago. He weaves between broken carts and collapsed fences until he stops at the old orchard. The orchard is a ruin. The frost hit early this year before the fruit could ripen, before the bees had finished their buzzing. The trees stand like withered giants, their bark split, their branches brittle as bone. But the boy is searching beneath one tree in particular. His hands rummage through the mulch and rot, and then success. He finds a half-eaten apple core, brown with age, caved in from frost. He bites into it without hesitation, and you don't stop him. You've done worse. Mainstream fact: during the Great Famine of 1315, 1317, it wasn't unusual for entire families to survive on spoiled grain, boiled grass, or animal hides soaked until soft enough to chew. Chroniclers speak of parents feeding children, the glue scraped from book spines or the leather from bridles. One account even recalls men frying nettles with moss, pretending the texture was meat. You once ate a boiled shoe sole. You didn't finish it, but you still think about the broth. You walk further out now, away from the remnants of your village and toward the abandoned barley plots. Nothing grows there now. The soil is too waterlogged, too wounded. The last time someone tried planting, the seeds rotted before they could sprout. You crouch anyway, digging gently with your fingers. It's a habit more than a hope. And that's when you hear the flute. A thin, reedy melody drifting on the wind. Not joyous, not mournful, just deliberate, measured, a human sound. You follow it, weaving between tree trunks and frost-patched bushes, until you find him. He's older, bundled in patched robes. His beard is more moss than hair. The flute in his hands is carved from bone animal, probably, but it wouldn't be impossible if it was something else. He looks at you without alarm, then gestures for you to sit. You do. He plays again, not a song but a pattern, notes like breath, each one a syllable in a language older than famine, older than you. Then he stops and speaks. You hungry? You nod. He doesn't offer food, but he pulls a bundle from his robia satchel made of stitched bark and string. Inside are dried leaves, some twisted roots, a powder of something yellow and fine. He sprinkles some into a small gourd, adds water from a skin, shakes it gently, then hands it to you. You drink. It tastes like wet socks and burned hay, but it warms you, just a little, enough. Quirky tidbit. Some believe that herbalists and wise men survived famines not by magic, but by knowing what not to eat. Knowledge of poisonous lookalikes, of what berries could be safely dried, or how to roast acorns to strip the tannins. These skills often meant the difference between life and death. Some communities kept these recipes secret, handed down like sacred songs. You sit with him longer than expected. You don't ask his name, he doesn't ask yours, but he tells stories in fragments. A woman who boiled bones so long the pot turned black. A man who swore the rain was cursed and wore a fish skeleton on his head to ward off bad luck. A girl who found a nest of duck eggs buried in the peat and became a village legend overnight. He finishes the flute's melody, then offers a final piece of wisdom. It's not always the strongest who survive. Sometimes it's the quietest. You thank him, then rise. You walk back with slower steps, letting the wind pass through your coat. At some point you realize you're humming his tune. You reach the village by dusk. Someone has lit a firera, small one, but it's enough to gather people. And there they are, your neighbors. Thin, silent, half ghosts. One has brought a single carrot. Another offers mushrooms. You bring nothing, but someone hands you a cup of warm broth, and no one asks for payment. You sit together in the failing light. No feasts, no laughter, but not alone. Historians still argue whether the bonds formed during famine made communities stronger or simply more desperate. Some records suggest spikes in charity, others describe a brutal slide into isolation and suspicion. But this night, this one feels like a truce. A whispered agreement that survival doesn't have to be solitary. Someone begins to hum, not a song you know, but familiar in the way wind is familiar. It folds into your bones. You sip your broth, you close your eyes, and for the first time in weeks, you feel not full, but less empty. Tomorrow will come, or not, but tonight you were fed, you were heard. You were still here. It rains again. Not a soft spring rain or a cleansing drizzle. This is the kind of rain that drags the sky down with it. A solid sheet of cold that flattens every living thing it touches. You wake to it pounding on the roof, the steady tap becoming a roar that makes it hard to tell where the world ends and the nightmare begins. You no longer jump up in excitement for rain. That was months ago, when your family hoped the fields would finally recover. Now, rain means rot, mold, damp walls and swollen shoes. The cellar leaking again, bread growing hair before it's even been eaten. You step outside with a cracked pot to collect what you can. Water, at least, is still free. It pools in the tracks left by cartwheels. It runs in gullies beside the road. You dip your fingers in the dirt that clings to your nisoggy, grey and cold, and you think, not for the first time, that this rain doesn't want anything to grow. It wants to claim what remains. The neighbors no longer speak as often. The older ones mutter from their doorways. Some have vanished entirely. The boy who traded you radishes for old clothes hasn't been seen in days. His house, once bright with laundry flapping from the rafters, has gone dark. Mainstream fact. By the end of 1316, nearly every region of Europe reported famine conditions. Not just poor harvests, but total agricultural collapse. Wet summers ruined crops, harsh winters killed livestock, salt became nearly unobtainable, making food preservation nearly impossible. Even the privileged began to starve. You head toward the village edge, where the woods begin dark, dense, and hostile. You've heard rumors of bark being boiled, of acorns being ground into paste, of mushrooms collected in silence, their edibility judged by desperate intuition rather than knowledge. But here you are, because you have to try. Your legs ache by the time you reach the tree line. The world is quieter here, but not peaceful. You hear the creak of damp branches overhead, the occasional snap beneath your feet. And then, movement something too quick for a deer, too quiet for a man. You freeze. It's just a fox, mangy, ribs showing, its eyes watching yours with something close to resentment. You wonder if it thinks you're competition. You are. You're both scavengers now. You gather moss, peel bark, collect handfuls of wet leaves that smell more like rot than food. You find one patch of mushrooms that seem vaguely familiar, but you're not sure. You decide to leave them. The last thing your family needs is another stomach twisted in knots. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, villagers were so desperate they attempted to eat animal feed brands soaked in urine, husks scraped from the corners of barns. In one German chronicle, it was recorded that dogs and cats were no longer seen in the town, not because they had died, but because they had been eaten. The idea comes to you slowly, like fog settling. What about the monastery? It's half a day's walk east. The brothers used to bring bread into the village, offer prayers and soup on Sundays. They haven't been seen in weeks. Maybe they left. Maybe they have stores. Maybe they'll turn you away. But the thought takes hold. You return home with almost nothing. Your siblings don't ask. Your mother doesn't scold. You sit by the hearth cold, unlit, symbolic more than useful, and you share what you gathered. She boils bark in the pot again. It smells like smoke and vinegar. You pretend it's stew. When you announce your plan to visit the monastery, she doesn't object. She just hands you a cloak and the last of the dried turnips. For the road, she says. You walk at dawn. The road is mostly mud, churned by wagon wheels that have long since stopped passing. You pass another traveler, one seaman with sunken eyes and 2 empty baskets. He doesn't speak. You don't either. Hours pass. The woods thin, then rise again. Eventually, through the mist and rain, you see the outline of stone walls. The monastery is still there. It is quiet. You approach cautiously, stepping over a crumbled gate. The courtyard is overgrown. Ivy has taken the walls, but someone has walked here recently. Mud tracked across the steps, a broken pot near the entrance. You knock. Nothing. You push open the heavy door. It groans like something half asleep. Inside, the chapel is still. Candles sit unlit. Benches lie empty. The smell is not death, not yet, but something older. Stale bread, wet wool, and smoke. Then you hear it. A cough. Deep, rattling, human. You follow it through narrow halls to a side chamber. There, on a straw mat, lies a monk. Thin, wrapped in a blanket, eyes closed, but breathing. He startles when you speak, then gestures. Take whatever is left. The cellar is not full, but it is not empty either. Root vegetables, mostly shriveled, a barrel of oats, a basket of dried peas, a single slab of salted fish, its edges white with age. You take what you can carry. Mainstream fact. During the worst of the Great Famine, religious institutions were often both sanctuary and source of tension. While some monasteries shared what they had, others hoarded supplies, leading to riots, break-ins, and even accusations of witchcraft. The monk dies 3 days later. You do not witness it, but you hear about it when you return the following week. Another brother tells you voice quiet, expression resigned. He refused to eat, said it should go to those still walking. You return to the village not as a savior, but as a lifeline. The food you bring buys another week, maybe 2. The peas go into a watery porridge. The oats are rationed. The fish well, no one mentions the fish. It is saved. For something. Historians still argue whether communal faith strengthened or collapsed during the Great Famine. Some evidence points to increased piety, more prayers, more pilgrimages, more donations. But others argue the opposite, that people lost faith in divine order, blaming God, saints, or even their own neighbors for the world's unraveling. What's certain is this: when the rains fall again, you don't curse, you just get up, wrap your cloak tighter, and go outside to collect the water. Because this is survival now. And you're getting better at it. The rain continues, soft as a whisper but relentless in its rhythm. By now, the mud path has grown more treacherous. You walk slowly, feet sinking with each step. The landscape no longer resembles farmland. It has turned into a watery plain stitched with ruined boundaries and forgotten fences. Puddles gather in the folds of fields like forgotten mirrors, and you no longer bother to step around them. Your shoes have lost their battle. Your socks are soaked, your toes numb. Somewhere nearby, a raven croaks. You spot it on a fence postone of the few still standing. Its feathers are glossy black, untouched by the damp. You pause. For a second, you're jealous of its detachment. The bird watches you with what might be curiosity, or pity, or maybe nothing at all. Then it flaps its wings and vanishes into the grey. You carry on. The village you approach doesn't have a name, or at least none that anyone remembers. A few houses remain, sagging into the landscape like elderly monks in prayer. Thatched roofs have collapsed under the weight of rain and time, leaving open mouths that once held warmth. You duck under a lintel beam and enter what used to be a communal house. Inside, the smell of smoke and wet wood lingers. Someone once tried to keep a fire going here. Someone tried to live. You find a broken bowl by the hearth. It holds nothing now, but the ring of salt residue at its bottom suggests it once cradled broth, maybe, made from boiled bark, or leather, or weeds. The hunger had a creativity to it. People chewed belts, boiled shoe soles, ground roots that had no name, and when all that ran out, they turned to the unspeakable. Historians still argue whether some villagers resorted to cannibalism out of desperation or ritual. The records are sparse, the language vague. But there are whispers of travelers who never returned, of children who vanished during stormy nights, of communal silence that weighed heavier than hunger. You step outside. The rain has not let up. It paints everything in a dull sheen. You squint across the flooded courtyard to where a large stone sits half submerged in earth. You almost miss it. But then you see the carvings. Names. They're faint eroded by time, moss, and weather, but still legible if you lean close. Dozens of them, perhaps 100. Some are simple. May, Toma, Reek. Others are etched with trembling strokes, likely by children. A few have dates next to them. Most do not. It hits you slowly. This isn't a monument, it's a ledger. You remember what the priest said in the last village. When no one had food left, people recorded the names of the hungry not to mourn them, but to remember who still needed help. A tally of suffering. A promise, maybe. Or a confession. You touch one name, Anja. Next to it, a faint glyph spiral that might mean returned or lost. It's hard to tell. You imagine her, hair plastered to her forehead, eyes too big for her face, fingers gripping a rag doll made of grass. You imagine her mother waking each morning and checking the stone. Did Anja still count? Did anyone bring something, a thing? You move on. Outside the village, a hill rises. It's modest, barely worth noting on a dry day, but now it looms like a fortress of mud and roots. At its base is a strange structure, neither shrine nor barn. Just 4 walls and a roof of mismatched tiles. You duck inside. It smells of rot, mold, and something older. A pit sits at the center. Not a well. Not quite. The edge is rimmed with stones, and someone has lined it with cloth, perhaps in an attempt to keep things clean. But the cloth is stained now, dark with age and rain. Bones lie at the bottom, small ones. Not arranged, just dropped. Some broken, some whole. You sit. Not for comfort, but because your legs demand rest. The silence inside the hut is oppressive. You imagine the choices that brought people here. A grandmother too frail to walk, a son feverish and convulsing, a neighbor no longer breathing. Did they whisper prayers? Did they feel shame? Quirky tidbit. Some local myths claim that spirits could not rise to the afterlife if their bodies were devoured. So instead, when starvation pressed too closely, families offered only limbs. A toe here, a finger there. Just enough for survival. The belief was that as long as the heart and head remained whole, the soul could still pass on. A horrifying compromise, a spiritual loophole. Historians debate whether this was widespread or simply legend. The records are patchy, overwritten by colonial scribes, sanitized by church chroniclers. What's left are rumors, bones, and a haunting absence. You leave the hut. The rain is softer now, but the clouds remain heavy. Your coat sticks to your skin. You walk the ridgeline, spotting markers bundles of twigs tied with string. Offerings. Warnings. You're not sure. Then, from the mist, a figure appears. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, barefoot and soaked. She doesn't speak, just stares. Her face is expressionless, but her eyes scan you like a ledger. You kneel and offer what little bread you have left. She doesn't move, doesn't blink. Then, a nod. She vanishes into the fog, leaving only small prints behind. You don't follow. Some things aren't meant to be pursued. Instead, you descend the hill and enter a small grove. The trees here are skeletal, bark peeling like old skin. Beneath one, you find a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, 2 boiled roots, a strip of dried moss, and a note scrawled in charcoal. For the next one, your throat tightens. You sit beneath the tree and share the meal with silence. The roots are bitter but filling. The moss tastes like dust and river, but it's enough. Somehow, it's enough. You close your eyes. For a moment, you let yourself believe that tomorrow will be better, that the rain will stop, that the ledger stones will grow moss thick enough to hide the names, that children will once again be afraid of the dark knot of the hunger. You breathe slowly, and the land listens. The night smells like mold and rotting grain. You pull the tattered shawl tighter across your shoulders, not because it's cold though it is, but because it gives you the illusion of protection. From the rain, from the hunger, from the shame. The only thing you've eaten all day is a slurry of boiled cabbage leaves that barely stayed down. Even the rats are skinnier now, which you didn't think was biologically possible. You haven't seen a pig in weeks. The chickens are all gone. A shadow passes over your roof, just a neighbor, or someone becoming less neighborly by the hour. You didn't sleep the night before. Someone screamed near the river. Someone else wailed until their voice broke. And somewhere out in the fields, you heard metal on metal. Not war, not anymore. Just desperate people banging pots and pans to make the crows leave the last 2 ears of maize alone. Mainstream fact: when the Great Famine of 1315 struck Europe, the rain didn't stop for over 2 years in some regions. Crops failed, salt pans flooded, livestock drowned or starved. And as grain prices soared beyond reach, Entire communities turned to anything that might stave off the hunger. You pass the home of the blacksmith and see that the forge is cold. His son was buried yesterday. They wrapped him in a wool coat, the only dry one left in the family, because, well, they wouldn't be needing it anymore. You catch the blacksmith's eye. He doesn't look away. He just nods slowly, like a soldier seeing another soldier after a battle. You've both survived another day. What you're walking toward is the market. But calling it that now feels dishonest. It used to be a riot of smells and shouting. Now it's quieter than a monastery. A few stalls remain upright, most draped in wet canvas and empty crates. And yet, people still come. Because hope is a stubborn thing. There's a woman you recognize. Her name was Elise. You remember when she had cheeks. Now her face looks carved. She's got a basket of onion peels and dandelion roots she boiled 3 times already, trying to sell the liquid as stew. Someone might buy it. Someone will buy anything. You pass a trader with barrels of salted fish at least that's what his sign says. You doubt the truth of it. The smell is too sharp, too sour. One boy peers into a crate and turns green. Whatever's inside isn't fish anymore. It might not even be meat. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Europe, during the peak of the famine, people began grinding up bones from cemeteries to mix into their flour. It added calcium, and a taste that no one talked about afterward. You keep your eyes low. There's a man behind a blanket selling bread the color of slate, dirt bread. Real flour is too dear now, so people use clay, or bark, or dried moss, if they're lucky. The bread tastes like shoe leather, soaked in sadness, but it fills the mouth, and sometimes that's enough to fool the stomach. You walk by a priest blessing dried weeds. He says the holy water will make them nourishing. You want to believe him, but even your faith is running thin. What's thicker than faith? Hunger. Always hunger. Historians still argue whether this period marked the worst famine in medieval Europe, simply the most widespread. Some regions were harder hit than others. Some monasteries had enough to eat. Others became mortuaries. The churchyards filled. The living got thinner, and the ground stayed wet. You pass a child chewing on a belt. You think it might have been yours. No one owns anything anymore. Not really. Possession now is about who's strong enough to hold it, or fast enough to run when the others come. You take a seat under the eaves of what was once a tavern. The sign is half hanging, and the ale barrels are long dry. But it's dry here, and that's something. You lean your head against the wall, listening to the faint patter of rain. It hasn't stopped, it won't stop, but you're dry, and you haven't fainted today. That counts as victory. And then you smell something. Real. Food. Not good food, but food nonetheless. You follow it like a ghost, drifting toward a doorway where a fire smokes from within. A pot hangs over the flame. The woman tending it doesn't look up. You don't speak. She gestures. You offer a silver clasp you pulled off your cloak earlier. She shrugs, takes it, and ladles out a thick scoop of something that might have started as parsnip. You eat it slow. Let it coat your mouth. You chew with reverence, swallowing with care, because you know it could come back up. Your stomach is a stranger now, unused to work. You thank her. She doesn't answer, just ladles the next bowl for someone else. There's no kindness here anymore, only trade, only survival. As you leave, you tuck a bit of that stew under your sleeve, for later, for someone. You don't know who yet. Maybe the child with the belt. Maybe someone worse off than you, which is a smaller and smaller group. Your boots squish in the mud. The clouds hang low. Somewhere nearby, a dog howls. It might be hunger. It might be mourning. You don't want to know. You think about your father, about the stories he used to tell. Back when meals were stories, not memories. He said the rain was a blessing. that it made the wheat tall and the barley proud. You wonder if he'd say the same thing now, watching the barley rot before it even heads. You reach the edge of town and see a tree with stripped bark. Children used to swing from its branches. Now even the insects have moved on. The wood is splintered, but the bark is gone. Someone boiled it. Probably didn't help. You crouch beside a puddle and look at your reflection. Your eyes are shadowed, your cheeks sunken. You look like someone from a dream you don't want to revisit. But you're still breathing. You're still walking. That's more than some can say. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and when you open them again, you stand. The road is still wet, the sky still grey, but there's a hill not far off, and someone said, "Wild onions grow there." You head toward the hill. The hill isn't far, but hunger makes distance a trickster. Each step feels longer than it should. The air clings to your skin, not warm, not cold, just damp in that way that reminds you your clothes haven't dried in days. Your boots squelch in the mud. The path up is no longer a path, just a suggestion of flattened grass and footprints where desperate feet have wandered before. You're not alone. Others have come looking for the same thing, wild onions, or maybe not onions anymore. The last harvest of them came and went a season ago. But sometimes, just sometimes, you can find the green stalks poking from the mud, defiant in the wet. Mainstream fact: during the Great Famine of 1000, 315 to 1000, 317, wild herbs and edible weeds became lifelines. Onions, nettles, dandelions, even thistles were foraged and boiled into soupy stews. Entire villages turned to the forest floor as their new pantry. At the base of the hill, a man crouches near a patch of something leafy. He doesn't speak, just shoves the bundle into his sack without looking up. You nod, though he doesn't see. There's no more sharing, not up here. You step past him quietly, the mud grabbing at your heels like it wants to pull you down and keep you. Halfway up, you pause beneath a tree. Its trunk is slick with rain and bare of bark. Children once carved their initials here. Now it's just gouges and teeth marks. Some folk eat the bark, hoping the fiber might trick their bellies. Others just chew to quiet the scream of emptiness. You find a patch of green, low to the ground. Sharp little stalks with bulbs buried deep. You drop to your knees and dig. Slowly, carefully. You don't want to damage the roots. The dirt crumbles like cake batter, soft and clinging. You find one. Not a full onion, but a bulb, tiny, pale. You brush the soil off gently like it's porcelain. One by one, you uncover more. Half a dozen. Enough for soup. Maybe. You hear a rustle behind you. You don't flinch. Just look. It's a girl barefoot, face hollow, clothes tied with string. She looks maybe 10, maybe younger. She's holding a stick like a sword. She says nothing, just watches. You break one of the bulbs in half and hold it out. She hesitates, then nods once and scurries forward to take it, then vanishes into the trees. You stay there a while longer, digging, gathering. The silence is different, here less empty, more expectant, like the land is watching, judging. Quirky tidbit. In some regions during the famine, local superstition blamed the rains on witches or unburied sin. People were known to dig up old graves to rebury bodies, properly hoping the storms would stop. You think about the girl, about what kind of world she'll remember if she survives, about how hunger teaches children to speak with their eyes instead of their mouths. Rain starts again. Not heavy, just mist that thickens into drizzle. You take your gathered bulbs and begin the trek back down. At the edge of the woods, you spot movement again. A group this time, 4 men. Armed, not soldiers, not anymore. Former mercenaries maybe, or just desperate. One carries a sword, rusting in its scabbard. Another has a bundle of bones on his back. Not animal bones, You step off the path and crouch behind a bush. They pass without looking, mumbling to each other in low voices. You don't want to know what they're hunting. Historians still argue whether cannibalism was widespread during the Great Famine. Some records speak of it, others dismiss those as exaggeration or propaganda. But when the grain stores are empty, and even tree bark runs thin, people become inventive. You hold the onions tighter. One falls, you don't reach for it. Back in town, the smoke is thicker. A barn has collapsed under the weight of its own soaked beams. No one bothers to rebuild anymore. There's no point. This isn't life. This is waiting. You return to your hut, push open the wooden door, and are met by the smell of damp straw and sweat. Your brother is inside. He's younger, thinner, sicker. You hand him the onions, one by one. He tries to smile, fails. You light what remains of your feria curl of dry root, stolen from the chapel floor. Into the pot goes water, then onion, then silence. As it simmers, you sit close, not touching, just nearby. You listen to the bubbling, to the cough of your brother, to the way the wind rattles the shutters like it's asking to be let in. You remember summer, vaguely. There was wheat, barley, fat sheep and sun on your neck. A harvest feast. The bread was soft, the butter golden. Now the butter is a memory. The bread is grey, and the sun doesn't come out anymore, except to mock you. You ladle the soup. It's more water than substance, but it smells like something real, like survival. You eat in silence, each sip a prayer. Later that night, you wake to the sound of thunder. Not sky thunder, the kind of thunder that comes from boots, dozens of them, marching, approaching. You peer through the cracks in your wall. Soldiers, real ones. They wear armor slick with rain, carry banners you don't recognize. They pass through the village like shadows, ignoring pleas, stepping over the sleeping, leaving muddy footprints that steam in the cold. You hold your breath. Your brother doesn't stir. They pass. And in their wake, silence again. The kind of silence that makes you wonder if they were ever there. You don't sleep, not really, just drift, like everyone else these days. By morning, your brother's cough is worse. He smiles, though, says the soup helped. You pretend to believe him. You open the door and breathe in the wet. The hill still stands. Maybe you'll go again tomorrow. Maybe not. But for now, you have enough. Enough to last until dusk. Enough to survive. Morning comes with a shift in wind. It smells faintly of rain not, the dramatic, storm-thundering kind, but the shy, hesitant drizzle that seeps into dry ground and coaxes seeds into waking. You listen to the leaves rustling like thin paper above your head and realize this is the sound of waiting ending. The monk is gone, just like that. No farewell, no final proverb, just an empty space where he used to sit, a circle pressed into the dirt, and one single cup left behind filled with rainwater. You keep it, not for tea, but as a reminder that some absences aren't losses, they're transitions. Word begins to spread from neighboring towns. Relief grain is arriving. Government carts, foreign donations, even stolen stores from corrupt officials raided by angry mob soul of it trickling in like cautious mercy. You volunteered to help distribute because, after everything, your hands need to be useful again. Mainstream fact. In many historical famines, community-driven relief systems developed faster than official ones. Networks of survivors, religious leaders, and even former criminals helped distribute stolen or hidden food. This decentralized survival often proved more efficient than imperial or colonial efforts. You ride with the first cart into a town you once passed in silence. Now you enter, not as a beggar, but a bearer of sustenance. The faces you see are hollowed, but they lift, just slightly. A girl points at the yams in the back. Real ones? She asks. Real enough, you say. Do they grow fast? You pause. Number, but they grow. That night, your group camps under a tree near the ruins of an old bathhouse. Someone brings out a flute. Someone else hums. The stars blink down like they're relearning how to sparkle. Quirky tidbit. In famine struck villages, it wasn't uncommon for music to return before bread. Humans, it turns out, crave rhythm almost as much as calories. Bamboo flutes and improvised drums often reappeared as soon as people could stand against sound as the first sign of life. One of the elders shares a story about a time when fish rained from the sky. Another recalls a dream about a chicken with 7 heads, who told him where to dig for carrots. You laugh not because you believe them, but because someone is finally telling stories again. As you drift to sleep on packed dirt, you remember what the monk said, "What's left?" You realize that's what survival is made of, not what you planned, not what you hoped, just what's left. And the next morning, what's left includes a sprout poking up from the ladle pot. You head home slowly, greeting people along the way. Your path crosses a familiar face, the ink-handed girl. She's wearing clean clothes now. She carries a satchel not of rice, but paper. She's walking from village to village, writing down memories. Her pages are no longer blank. You offer her a place to stay for the night. She agrees, and after dinner cabbage and turnip stew, thickened with what might be wild mint, you ask her why, she writes. "Because I can't forget," she says. "Is that good?" "No," she replies, "but it's honest." Historians still argue whether famine memory should be archived or allowed to fade. Some cultures erect shrines or monuments to honor the dead. Others let the past dissolve, fearing it may reopen wounds too deep to heal. You decide to remember, quietly, without bitterness. The yam leaves spread wider. The bathhouse is rebuilt. The tea you serve now tastes of ginger and rain. And one evening, as fireflies blink in lazy spirals, you sit beneath the tree where the monk once listened. You sip from his old cup, and for the first time, you don't ache. Because the world hasn't returned to what it was. But neither have you. And that might be enough. You wake to the sound of sweeping, not wind through leaves, not animals scurrying, actual sweeping the dry brush of straw against packed earth. A young boy outside your door is clearing the space in front of your steps. When you ask him why, he shrugs. My grandmother said it's what people did before guests. Expecting someone? You ask. Number just didn't want to forget how. That's the thing about survival, it's not a destination. It's a collection of instincts, rituals, and borrowed behaviors, slowly returning one by one. You begin to notice it everywhere. Clothes being mended instead of burned. Water being boiled before drinking, even when the stream looks clear. Children reciting proverbs they barely understand, simply because rhythm feels like order. You take a walk to the river with a basket of boiled yam peel and cabbage cores. Not for yourself, but for a neighbor's pigs. Yes, pigs. She's managed to coax 2 skinny ones into surviving the worst. They squeal with surprise at the food. It almost sounds like laughter. Mainstream fact. In many post-famine communities, recovery didn't begin with grain, it began with livestock. A single surviving pig or goat could be the cornerstone of rebuilding. And because most grain was kept for people, these animals were often fed kitchen scraps or weeds, transforming refuse into resilience. You talk with the pig keeper. She tells you she never wanted animals. Too smelly, too needy. But they eat like I did, she says, without shame. Maybe that's why I kept them. The village slowly becomes a place again, not just a collection of people, but a rhythm. Smoke curls from chimneys. Neighbors call out names instead of numbers. A baby cries with lungs strong enough to startle a bird from the eaves. That bird lands in a tree. A sparrow maybe, or just a lucky pigeon. You find yourself smiling at it anyway. Then, one day, word spreads of someone returning. The official. Not the same man who fled before. He's younger, sent by the same governor, perhaps, or a replacement governor. He arrives not with soldiers, but with a cart of scrolls and stamped papers and an apologetic frown. He bows deeply at the village gate, too deeply, perhaps, but nobody stops him. He tries to explain. There were supply lines. There were floods. There were miscommunications. But mostly, there were excuses. And now, reparations. He offers seed rice, salt, a set of new tools forged from state reserves. Even a few lengths of fabric dyed in official red, the color of renewal, he says. People listen politely, then silently disperse. No cheering, no shouts. Just a handful of villagers approach the cart, collect what's given, and walk home without a word. Quirky tidbit. In many famine-struck regions, government attempts to restore goodwill with lavish, but late generosity were met with indifference or quiet resentment. Survivors often leaned on their own informal networks more than on official aid, having learned the hard way where true help came from. That night, you gather with a few others around a fire pit. The ink-handed girl reads from a scroll she wrote herself. It's not a history, not really, just fragments, descriptions. Things remembered. One man traded an onion for a comb. Another woman buried her potatoes, then forgot where. There was a dog that cried like a human. You don't ask whether they're true. That's not the point. You add one of your own. A stranger left behind a teacup full of rain. Someone else offers another. A man swept the steps with no one coming. And just like that, a kind of ritual begins. A soft oral archive, built not from facts alone, but from feeling. Historians still argue whether these narratives count as history, without dates, without footnotes, without verification. But those same historians often fail to ask the people who lived them, who dreamed them, who kept them warm at night. Eventually the official leaves, not chased away, not welcomed either, just released. A week later, a woman from the next province brings rice seedlings, not to trade, not to sell, to plant. She lost 3 children. She says this will help. You offer her the garden bed where the ladle sprout now stands, almost knee-high. She touches its leaves and nods. Strong, she says. Soft, but strong. And maybe that's the whole village now. You sleep that night with the window open. The piglets snort. A baby hiccups. Someone sings off-key in the distance. Nothing is healed, but healing has begun. The rains return slowly. They're not the drenching monsoon kind, nor the indifferent mist you barely notice. These are somewhere in between long, slanted curtains of water that turn packed earth soft, that rinse old soot from roofs, that tug a quiet scent of grass from places you thought were dead. And as the rains return, so does a strange emotion you've almost forgotten how to carry. Hope. But hope isn't comfortable. It's not a warm blanket or a bowl of rice. It's more like an itch somewhere between your ribs that you don't want to scratch in case it disappears. You begin spending more time in the garden. Things are actually growing now. Not just the hardy weeds that always come first, but actual vegetables. Peas, onion tops, a single string of garlic chive. The piglets have names now, onigiri and plumand. They'll come when called if you offer melon peel. One morning, you see children playing something that looks suspiciously like tag, though none of them will admit it. They call it shadow walking. No running, just slow steps behind each other, pretending to be ghosts. You watch from a distance and wonder if they remember what silence used to sound like. Mainstream fact: in many post-famine rural regions, children's games were some of the first signs of emotional recovery. Anthropologists observed that in cultures where storytelling and play resumed, collective trauma began to loosen its grip. A traveling monk stops by one afternoon. He's lean and weathered, eyes lined like paper folds. He doesn't preach, doesn't beg, just accepts a bowl of soup and sits under a tree, whispering something to the wind. When you ask what he's doing, he says, "Reminding the dead they are remembered." That night, you dream of everyone you've lost, not as they died, but as they lived, laughing, cooking, singing off-key. You wake with damp cheeks and no shame. The monk leaves behind a scrap of cloth on your doorstep. On it, drawn in careful brushstrokes, is a tiny image of a ladder reaching into a cloud. Quirky tidbit: in some East Asian traditions, ladders were drawn during remembrance rituals as a way to invite the dead back for one final visitor to help them climb out of sorrow. It wasn't always clear which direction the ladder pointed. That was intentional. By now, the village feels like a living thing again. Its pulse is slow, but present. People laugh without flinching. The evening fire gatherings sometimes end with song. Someone has started fermenting plum wine again poorly, but earnestly. You sip it and wince, and the wince turns into a smile. And then, one day, the market returns. It's not much, just 3 carts at first, parked near the shrine. One offers pots, one offers turnips. The third is a man with a lute and a bucket, offering songs in exchange for stories. You trade him a tale about cabbage soup thickened with rock dust. He sings you a song about a girl who fell in love with a tree. No one claps when he finishes, but no one walks away either. You notice something else. No one is talking about back then anymore. Not directly. No one says, "the famine." They say things like, "before the grey winter," "back when salt was gold," "during the time of empty spoons." Historians still argue whether collective euphemisms distort memory or preserve it, whether changing the words erases the facts. But maybe facts aren't the only things worth remembering. Maybe the way we frame our pain is also a kind of truth. One night, during the final downpour of the season, the piglet named Onigiri goes missing. You search for her with a lantern, calling into the mist. Your breath fogs the air. Your feet sink into mud. You imagine the worst foxes, traps, hunger. But then you hear a soft grunt. She's stuck near the garden fence, caught under a half-collapsed plank. You lift it carefully. She blinks at you, eyes wide, ears twitching. Then she climbs out and follows you home without a sound. And just like that, you realize you've survived. You don't mean just today, or this week. You mean the entire season of silence, the endless days of brittle cabbage and cracked bowls, the whispers and ration, math and wind that carried no smell. You survived. And now you're planting again, not just food, but futures. At the edge of your garden, where the soil still feels new, you press something down. Not a seed, not exactly, just a scrap of cloth with a ladder on it. You bury it under a stone and whisper, "For them," because someone should be remembered. And someone always should return. Summer finds you before you're ready. The first thing you notice is the heat not dry and distant, but intimate. It presses close like someone whispering secrets you don't want to hear. Chickens puff their feathers and stretch flat against the ground to stay cool. The dog doesn't bark anymore. He just pants with a kind of world weariness, like he's remembering winters he never lived through. The garden thrives in this heat, though. Vines curl up your fence posts. Leaves cast shadows on the ground that shimmer like water. You don't trust it. Not yet. It feels too much like a dream you once had, back when food was a rumor and sleep was a stranger. But it's real. There's food on your table. You chew slowly, suspiciously, half expecting your mouth to forget what to do. One day, someone suggests a festival. At first, it's said like a joke. Maybe we'll dance if we don't drop dead this month. But jokes have power. They root themselves in cracks. And pretty soon, people are planning it for real tentatively, nervously, like the gods might overhear and take offense. Mainstream fact. After major famines, festivals were sometimes revived not as celebrations, but as collective rituals of survival. The point wasn't joy. It was proof that people were still willing to come together under lanterns and laughter, even if their smiles felt brittle. You agree to help. Your job? Lanterns. You're given a fistful of rice paper, a brush, and a tiny pot of ink. No one tells you what to write, so you write names. Not all the names. That would take too long. But a few. The ones that still ache when the wind hits you just right. A boy walks by and asks what you're doing. You say, "Feeding ghosts." He nods, like, "That makes perfect sense," and hands you a plum. The night of the festival is sticky with warmth. Crickets sing like they've been waiting for this moment all their lives. The villagers move slowly, not out of sadness anymore, but reverence. A kind of fragile joy. There's dancing, yes, but mostly there's watching. Faces turned up to the light, eyes reflecting fire and memory. Quirky tidbit. In some rural communities across Asia, paper lanterns were believed to guide not only the living, but the dead. Hung at doorways, they helped spirits find their way back for one last visit. A glowing breadcrumb trail between worlds. Someone sets up a game booth with small, uneven balls and chipped wooden targets. The prize is pickled radish. Children scream with delight when they win, and grown-ups pretend it isn't the best prize they've ever seen. You eat cold noodles with cucumber and vinegar and nearly cry because it tastes like before. Someone sings. Someone else plays flute. Someone else just lies in the grass, eyes closed, arms folded, like they're listening for the rhythm of the earth itself. Historians still argue whether these kinds of post-famine gatherings helped people heal or merely papered over deeper wounds, whether shared rituals are catharsis or camouflage. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the act of gathering is the healing. Not the story you tell, but the fact that you're still around to tell it. Near the end of the night, a small girl tugs on your sleeve. "Can I carry one?" she asks, pointing to your last unlit lantern. You nod. She takes it with both hands, like it's a treasure. You strike the flint and light the candle inside. It flickers once, then glows steady. She beams, then walks toward the shrine, holding the light high. You stay there a long time, long after most have gone home. Lanterns bob in the distance, disappearing one by one behind trees and doorways. The smell of smoke hangs in the air, soft and familiar. Eventually, you gather your things. As you turn to leave, you notice something near your feet, a stone with a ladder carved into it. You didn't put it there, but you smile because someone did. And maybe that's the point. You survived hunger, you survived silence, and now you survived joy. It's not easy. Joy feels strange in your body, like a borrowed coat that still carries someone else's scent. But it fits, slowly, awkwardly, beautifully. You walk home under stars you forgot had names. You hear it before you believe it. A cart, 2 wooden wheels creaking like bones, trundling down the road in the morning mist. You peek through the cracks of the doorframe and see a man pushing it. Slow but steady. There's no horse, just the strength of his arms and a will sharper than famine. The cart is filled with sacks. You don't know what's inside yet, But the villagers begin to stir. The whisper spreads quickly. Relief. You step outside cautiously, blinking into the sunlight like someone waking from too long underground. Your legs are thin, your eyes too big for your face now, but you can still walk. There's no announcement, no speech, just a quiet queue forming. Someone's uncle says the grain came from a coastal province that didn't suffer as badly this year. Some shipment intercepted, rerouted by a sympathetic officer. Others say it's a political stunt, a gesture of goodwill before new taxes arrive. You don't care. Politics tastes the same either way, like boiled hope and dirt salt. What matters is that when your turn comes, a hand reaches into a sack and pulls out exactly 2 bowls of rice, warm, slightly sticky, and undeniably real. You don't cry until you sit back down at your threshold and start eating. Not fast, not greedy, just steady, like someone remembering how. Later, you'll think about everything you did to get here, the things you learned, the people you lost, the quiet prayers you buried in frozen earth like seeds. You'll think about the family that didn't make it, the old man across the road who stopped waking up 2 weeks ago, the baby who never had a name, all the ghosts that now feel like neighbors. Mainstream fact: by the end of the Great Famine, population counts dropped dramatically across rural regions. Entire villages vanished from the census. Officials tried to sanitize the reports, often blaming migration, epidemics, or economic stagnation. But the bones in shallow graves told a different story. Quirky tidbit: in one province, people reportedly began to worship an improvised famine god, a bundle of sticks tied with string, placed in the corner of every kitchen. It listens better than the old gods, someone joked before bowing their head and offering it steam from the cooking pot. Historians still argue whether survival in these times was more luck or cleverness. Was it the ones who planned ahead, stored root vegetables under floorboards, who survived? Or the ones who begged hardest, moved fastest, adapted quickest? Or was it random determined by which rain cloud passed your field or which guard happened to be kind? You stop wondering what you did right. You just accept that you are here. The roads begin to clear. Small trade routes reawaken. You walk to a neighboring village and see a child flying a paper crane made from a government notice. A woman is laughing for the first time in months. You feel the shape of a smile growing on your own face and marvel at how strange it feels. And then there's the moment you finally eat something sweet again. It's a plum, wrinkled, sun-dried, and impossibly small. You suck it slowly, afraid to finish it too soon. But that sweetness, it blooms like memory. You can feel your childhood in your throat again. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting the hunger, but allowing yourself to taste beyond it. By now, the worst of the famine is over, but the aftermath is a long echo. Your bones still remember. Your dreams are still sparse. You walk differently, slower, wiser. And when you see someone thinner than they should be, your eyes soften without needing to ask. You don't speak about it often, not because of shame, but because there aren't words for everything. You carry it in gestures instead. A longer pour into someone's bowl, a hand offered before it's needed. A spare root saved in the corner of the cupboard, just in case. You survived the famine. Not because you were stronger or better, but because you endured. And you know now deep in your stomach, in your soul, in the hollow behind your ribs, that endurance is its own kind of victory. And now, the story quiets. You rest in a home that's still standing, beneath a roof that no longer leaks. The nights are no longer filled with the sound of empty pots clanging or stomachs rumbling in chorus. Just the wind outside, soft through the thatch, and the occasional creak of wood settling beneath its own memory. You lie on your side and pull the blanket closer. It's not thick, but it's warm now, not just from the cloth, but from knowing that tomorrow there might be enough. Outside, a dog barks once and then settles. A candle burns low in its holder, the flame swaying slightly, like it's trying to fall asleep too. There's a bowl by the door with a few leftover grains in it. You think about saving them. You think about giving them away. You think about nothing at all. Because survival, after a while, becomes stillness, not triumph, not celebration. Just the steady, silent return of breath, the kind that doesn't ask for any except the next one.